discuss what we need to discuss.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. It's 1801. Welcome to Monday, April 17th meeting of the Common Council of the City of St. John. We have a few pages here. Usually have like 800, but today we only have, let's see on my list here, 115. So everybody's trying to figure out what time we're going to get out, so we'll see. All right, City Clerk, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Oh, and we're going to start with a land acknowledgement first. Councillor Radwan, over to you, please. Councillor Radwan's mic on? Oh, yeah, it is.
There we go. Thank you, Mayor. The land on which the City of St. John, or the Minnequist, is situated is the traditional territory of the Wolastoqiyik. The Wolastoqiyik, along with their indigenous neighbors, the Mi'kmaq and Passamaquoddy, signed peace and friendship treaties with the British Crown in the 1700s that protected their rights to lands and resources. Let us reflect.
Okay, I'll ask everyone to please stand for the national anthem. Okay, City Clerk, next item.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next item on the agenda is 2.1, minutes of April 3rd, 2023.
Minutes of April 3rd, 2023. The Deputy and Councillor Sullivan on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
Next is the approval of the agenda with 3 additions from Committee of the Whole. 17.1 would be St. John Industrial Catalytic Project. 17.2 would be proposed sale of 450 Fallsview. And 17.3, stopping train whistles, including at 2 West Side rail crossings.
All right, and if there is no opposition, I would like to move our presenters up right after the consent agenda. So, okay, I'll take a motion then to accept the agenda. Deputy? No. Councillor Lowe on the question? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
Next is disclosures of conflict of interest, if we have any.
Being none, moving on to next item.
Next is item 5, the consent agenda.
Deputy, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move 5.1 through to 5.7, please.
5.1 to 5.7. I have a question. Councillor Radwan, over to you for your question.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to thank Commissioner Hugenholtz who took my call earlier in discussion about the asphalt resurfacing. I just wanted to make a point that, I think the residents would be interested in looking at the list of roads that we're reconstructing and resurfacing. But it also brings light to me when I look at a road like the Glen Road, that we're just not getting enough tax dollars to be able to look after the geographical size of our city. So I just wanted to make those comments.
Thank you, Councillor. You're probably correct. You have 600 kilometers of roads in a 300 square kilometer geography, which is 1,200 lanes when you start plowing it. So it is a lot of asphalt, although we don't charge for it yet, to drive on it. All right, any other questions? Okay, so Councillor, you move that. Do we have a seconder on that? Councillor Sullivan? Okay, on the question? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, City Clerk.
Next, so we'll move past members' comments on to 8.1, which is a presentation by NB Power.
Okay, this evening we have Andy Hayward here, who's going to present to us on behalf of NB Power. We have his cheering section is up there as well. So I'm going to hand that right over to you. And I do appreciate you coming in this evening, and I know that you've been to some of the other councils as well to give this presentation. So it's some of it I need translated, I think, for me when I read through some of the acronyms, et cetera. But over to you, Andy.
All right, thank you, Mayor Reardon and councilors, for having us here tonight. We appreciate the opportunity. And I have given this a few times. So I'm going to talk to you. I'm the director of the Advanced Reactor Development Program for NB Power, and I'll just give you about 15 minutes worth of what we're doing. I'm happy to talk for hours if you have lots of questions, but we'll keep the 15 minutes tonight.
I'd like to leave a bit of time for questions, so yes,
Yeah,
10 to
so
15
I'll
would
give
be
you-
perfect.
I'll give you about 10 then. So first, let's talk about the energy change drivers. People, if you look statistically, are using more and more energy, and as the world develops, the developing world is using more and more energy. So we're in a bit of a crisis for energy. And the drivers for the change right now include climate change, which a lot of people know about, energy security. So after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, it amplified the energy security concerns. Cost, and when we talk about cost, it's really the integrated cost to consumer that we should concern ourselves with. The people like you and me, what do we pay at the end of the day for that energy? And some secondary considerations for a province like New Brunswick and some municipalities like we have are, what are the actual economic benefits of the energy source we're getting for the local region? And how does it drive the high-tech economy and the mindset of innovation? So I'll give you a little bit about each of those. Climate change, we're trying to get away from fossil fuels as a source of energy. About 80% of the world's energy comes from fossil fuels right now, so it's a radical change we have to make. Energy security is an interesting one. It's a global issue, much like climate change. Global issue, federal policies and rules and regulations, but it has to be managed regionally. So, energy security to somebody in Alberta is very different to energy security to somebody in New Brunswick. And cost, again, sometimes you'll hear energy sources or electricity sources advertised as low cost, but it may be low cost at the point of production. But what does it cost to get it to you and me in a safe, reliable, clean way? So that's what's driving this conversation. I wanted to, maybe through the journey that NB Power went through on behalf of the province, as we, a few years ago, as we analyzed this situation, how do we accomplish those goals that I just talked about? And, we looked at what's clean, what's the least expensive, how do we get energy security in New Brunswick? Do we want to be dependent on other jurisdictions supplying our energy source? Probably not. Let's look at how we generate it ourselves, right? And we quite quickly narrowed down the choices to the point where we had to have a nuclear component in that mix, right? And surveying the nuclear landscape, and with the size of the demand and the shape of the demand and the changes in demand over time here in New Brunswick, bringing on smaller chunks at different times seems like the logical solution for New Brunswick. So we landed on advanced nuclear reactors, went through a selection process, reviewed about 100 different technologies, and ended up choosing two technology partners here in New Brunswick, ARC and Moltex, who you probably are familiar with. ARC is a solution to this on-grid electricity and energy needs all across the province and just about anywhere. Moltex is more of an environmental liability reduction technology that happens to produce energy at the same time. You may have had presentations from them in the past. So what I'm trying to describe with this part of the presentation is we've analyzed the potential solutions, know that nuclear needs to be part of the mix, and these small modular reactors, other jurisdictions, other countries are coming to the same conclusions, and we're going to need hundreds of these small modular reactors. So, in our logic, do we want to be involved in developing and deploying this fleet of hundreds of small modular reactors and take advantage of the economic benefits and the high-tech workforce that comes associated with that? We do. Right? So we're going to need all clean energy solutions because of that dependency around the world on fossil fuels. So this is a renewable energy and SMRs and efficiencies and local distribution networks and everything we can do in the clean energy space. So New Brunswick's actually very well situated. We're at a hub. We've got 13 interconnections with other jurisdictions, PEI, Nova Scotia, New England, Quebec. And so we're well positioned to export once we get to the point where we're satisfying ourselves, or if it meets the supply-demand profiles. But New Brunswick's also kind of unique because 3/4 of the province heats with electricity. So we get this wild change in demand in the winter versus the summer. And we set a record again this year. We set a record last year for peak demand. We set another one on February 4th this year, 3,442 megawatts. We go down to 1,000 megawatts in the summer. So it's a tough supply-demand situation if you're the supplier. And when you're a regulated utility that is the producer, transmitter, distributor, and system manager, you have to accommodate all that. So we actually have to produce 20% or be able to produce 20% more than the peak demand that we get. So we have to have the capability of supplying 4,100 megawatts to the province because that's what we had to do on February 4th. Right? And February 4th, you may remember, pretty winter storm, high winds. The winds were high enough that we actually couldn't produce much wind power that day. The previous record on January 27th, 2022, there was no wind. It was one of those minus 35 cold, still mornings. So when it's dark and there's no wind, solar and wind power don't do much for you. So on that day, half the generation came from fossil fuels, and that's something we have to get away from because the grid rules are changing. Net zero demands us to get away from that. And that gap, a big chunk of that gap is going to be filled by those small modular reactors, either here or imported from another jurisdiction. So what are we actually trying to do? We're trying to demonstrate the two reactor technologies that I described, ARC and Moltex. ARC in and around 2030, Moltex in the mid-2030s. They supply two different markets. Moltex is going to co-locate where there's existing nuclear plants and use their spent fuel for the energy source. And ARC can go just about anywhere. We want to centralize the fleet support here in New Brunswick. So for every one of these reactors that's deployed, we want to have all of the maintenance, engineering, support services, supply chain, that sort of thing, maximize the New Brunswick content on those. Punch above our weight, so to speak. We want a disproportionate amount of the support services so we can bring those dollars back to New Brunswick. And the supply chain is interesting. These newer technologies are simpler designs, simpler reactors, and it opens up the possibility of supplying a lot of the parts from New Brunswick. So I talked about ARC. I'm not going to get into the technology too much, but I do want to tell you that the generation of nuclear reactors that exists in the world right now, there's 457 reactors operating in the world right now, 19 of them in Canada. And they operate on the principle of defense in depth. It's the safest, I can show you statistics, safest industry in the world. And it achieves that safety currently by having defense in depth or backups on the backups on the backups. And consequently, it's complicated. There's a lot of equipment. There's a lot of people required for the maintenance and upkeep and so on. And it's been a great source of electricity for the province of New Brunswick and in Ontario in particular. But the advances that have come along, the new reactors, the ARC reactor that we're talking about is what we say is inherently safe, meaning it shuts itself down with no human intervention if there's any type of excursion or event in the plant. So consequently, you don't need all the backups on the backups on the backups on the backups. And it's simpler and easier to construct. These are small modular reactors. We're going to do much of the construction modularly in a factory and assemble on site as opposed to stick building it on site. Smaller, it's about the right size to supply a lot of the industrial applications that are out there. You don't put a great big reactor in the middle of oil sands, but you might put nuclear reactors like small modular reactors or a cement factory or potash mines in Saskatchewan, for example. It's an interesting reactor neutron flux, or the characteristics of the reactor are extremely conducive to producing medical isotopes, which is another benefit. You know, you may have strong opinions one way or the other about nuclear power. You may have strong opinions one way or the other about NB power, but it's hard not to like medical isotopes. That's probably enough about ARC. ARC is going through their preliminary design right now, working with the regulator to find out if there's any significant changes they have to make to their design before it gets licensed. And as I say, it'll be online in the 2030-ish timeframe. One of the things I wanted to make note of for you as we go through our, we're going to submit a license to prepare site in a few months here, which triggers also an environmental impact assessment. And one of the studies we're doing is a sustainability and well-being assessment. And that involves a lot of the communities. Part of the reason we're here today is to let you know about the sustainability and well-being assessment we're doing. And you're welcome to be part of it if you like, if you're not already. We've got some people that look at the overall impact of that plant, social, economic. You mentioned roads earlier. What's it going to do to traffic and so on. So there's a lot of local area impacts that is necessary for this industry to study before we ever get permission to move on. So if you want to be involved in that, just let us know through the communication channels that you have. Moltex I mentioned, again, I'm not going to go into the technology too much, but this is a beautiful idea. The storage of spent fuel, what we call spent fuel, still has 97 to 99% of its fuel energy left in it. The way the CANDU reactor is designed, we only use about 1% of the energy, and then we put it in storage. So it's all stored safely on the LaPro site. Moltex's concept is to take the energy that's left in that fuel and use it as an energy source and reduce that environmental liability. The radioactivity that's in there, they're going to significantly reduce the volume of waste and significantly reduce the radioactivity that's left in there too. So it's a great idea. And as I say, co-locate with existing plants. They're still in a conceptual design phase, so it's going to take a little longer to come to fruition with that one, more like mid-2030s. Talked about timelines already. So the only other thing I'll talk about, I mentioned supply chain briefly earlier. Canada is a top-rate nuclear nation with an existing supply chain mostly based in Ontario right now. So the opportunity that's in front of us with these technologies is to bias that supply chain towards New Brunswick. And as the studies we've done, we have the capability of moving much of the supply chain here, certainly over 50%, maybe up to 60, 70% here in New Brunswick. So we don't need it all. We just want more than our fair share as part of doing this.
Andy, it's 6:20, and we're going to move to
Yep.
public hearings at around 6:30. So I've got some questions lined up, so can we
That's
do
it.
the
That's-
next 10
that's all I
minutes of
wanted
a
to say
few
to you.
questions for you? Councillor Hickey, over to you first.
Thanks very much, Your Worship, and thanks for the presentation. It's pretty cool if you ever get a chance to be at Point LaPro. There's a big board with all of the different percentages of what's coming. what's producing power in New Brunswick. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm off the cuff here, but I think it's NB Power's around, or sorry, LaPro's around 40% on average, somewhere around there, producing around, I don't know, 5,000 gigawatts an hour or something like that.
No, we produce about 700 megawatts
Okay.
on a regular basis, and we provide somewhere in that 35 to 40% of the power for the province, almost like 3/4 of it in the summer and down around a quarter in the winter.
So in 25 years when we're looking for options for LaPro, is SMR fill that gap?
Yeah, so if I went back a few slides here, if I look at this one, where you can see in the winter, we need half of the supply is coming from fossil fuels. So we need to replace a bunch of the fossil fuels as well. So Beldoon, Colson Cove have to be replaced eventually. And LaPro, when the time comes, we're going to have to look at whether we do another refurbishment or replace it with something like small modular reactors. And that's an economic decision at that time.
Thank you.
Short answer is yes.
No, you're good.
Perfect. Councillor Killen, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, thank you for your presentation. Can you talk to me a little bit about storage opportunities for wind and solar? I know you said, what about a cloudy day or not a windy day, but isn't there extensive battery technology now for these sorts of things to be able to store that energy long-term?
Yeah, there's a few things on this. There are storage options, and that's one of the things we have to get into. If you look at that integrated cost that I mentioned, and you look at the overall cost of supplying us with the power, it's actually more expensive to do it that way because the best batteries in the world right now, and there's been extensive research, they're only going to last about 4 hours. So for short periods, it's a good option. For longer periods, there's a lot of our storms that last longer than 4 hours. Right?
Is there like comparables on your website for how these all shape up together? SMRs versus wind and solar cost-wise? Like, are you trying to demonstrate that as an organization?
There's nothing on the website, but there are studies that have been done in a number of jurisdictions that prove that. I can get you some information if you want.
Thanks.
All right, Councillor Harris, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm cognizant of the fact that we don't have any ability to set direction here for NB Power, right? I mean, this is important information for us to take in, so I appreciate you coming. So I'm not less talking to you in a governance position here, more as an interested citizen. I guess there's a couple things to this that's concerned me. I'd love your input on it. One is this idea of distributed energy storage, which I get that, if you're going to try to do that from a singular infrastructure perspective, it's hard. But from an incentive perspective, it's not that hard for there to be incentives for homeowners to put something small in their house for their own needs that can be supportive and build resilience for the overall grid, because the grid balancing is the problem. So have we looked at that? And if not, the other piece to that puzzle is I don't know, it's hard from a perspective of history to say, like, does NB Power have the track record to be going down this road with SMR as an exploration of opportunity? I've heard scientists on both sides in the industry say, I heard an interview recently, one was saying very clearly, we only have paper reactors, really, and we have nuclear submarines to look at. We don't have functionality to produce any sort of concept of rollout, investment, scalability, profitability, all of that. It's hard to look at. So that's the hard part, is like, shouldn't we just be fast followers with what's already there rather than trying to be innovative? I mean, we kind of lost the game on Joy Scientific or Mulgen back in 2001. Like, it seems to be a long history here, and I struggle with it, I guess, from a visual perspective.
And so I think the way I'll answer that, it's an excellent question, and I'm not going to give you probably a satisfactory answer, but I'm going to give you some information. So as we explore what the options are, and as most of the technical exploration is done, you end up with a necessary nuclear piece of the puzzle. So then the question is, should we really be involved in developing it or not, right? And the way we've done the analysis, we still need some federal support to make this make sense. And to date, we've not spent much money from the, we've been subsidized by the federal government to spend most of the money we've spent so far as NB Power. So there's going to come a point in time where if there isn't a significant subsidy or a business case that makes it make sense for New Brunswick, that we're just going to be a follower and buy somebody else's technology. At the present time, it looks like having the economic benefits of that high-tech industry here in the province, the extra incentive of the supply chain, and the possibility to deploy a lot of these reactors all over the province, country, and export them, that it makes sense. It makes a business case.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan, squeezing you in.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks for the presentation. And actually, just thank you to NB Power. I sit on St. John Energy's board here as the council rep, and I know the conversations that are going back and forth recently in tone and future-looking in development are really partnered conversations, so thank you for all of that. I agree with Councillor Killen that now locally, we've done a little bit of experimentation, got a battery and then maybe another in the works. So I think storage, that was the only piece I thought might have been missing from that donut. I certainly agree that if we want to get away from fossil fuels, you need a backup option for when the sun isn't shining, for when the wind isn't blowing, and for when the battery runs out. Nuclear makes sense. I guess my only real question is, we are also very cost sensitive for the future and costs of electrification. Do we know or have an estimate at this point what the ultimate cost of the consumer may end up being, or how much it will cost, like SMRs and what they're worth, as far as not the cost to build them, but
Yeah,
once
so-
we eventually have to charge out the electricity?
Yeah, and I'll give you kind of the same answer that I gave before. When you look at that integrated cost, how it gets to the consumer, it's the most cost-effective option. And
Do we have an estimate of a number?
it's higher than what we pay today. You know, ultimately, it depends on how you configure them. If you put a 4-pack of small modular reactors, it's going to be under $100 a megawatt hour. And if you compare that to options, that's better,
Yeah.
significantly better. I'm going to keep saying it. Just look at the integrated cost to consumer, because you just can't finance a solution that is going to be less expensive at the end of the day. And you know, it's going to cost more. We're being forced with the net zero goals of the country to retire assets that haven't been paid for yet, and replace them with something new. So new is difficult. Canada is one of the hardest countries in the world to construct anything, and we're being forced to retire assets before their time. So the price is going to go up to us. We just have to minimize it.
But as I understand, but $100 is kind of the going rate now anyway. So if that electricity can get produced at that cost with new, that's a good thing.
Yes, because the last estimate I saw of renewable resources with storage solution without nuclear is like $239 a megawatt hour.
Yeah. No, thank you.
All right, well, Andy, thank you for coming in this evening. It's I like the requirements that you've got in there, obligations, vision. There's a lot in your little presentation there. I thought it's good. I'm looking for somebody to come here, though, with recovery of energy. If my grade 11 physics says that it can never be created nor destroyed, then we got to recover it, I guess, maybe. So I do appreciate being here tonight, and thank you for your team for coming here as well. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, City Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. We skipped over members' comments, so that would be the next item. Members' comments, item 6.
Do we not have to do the public hearing at night, 6:30?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
Okay.
it's now 6:30. Good timing, Your Worship. So we will come back to members' comments after the public hearing. So item 9.1 on your agenda is a public hearing for street closure for a portion of Fieldstone Drive.
Okay, I'm handing this one over to Melanie Tompkins for the introduction.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, members of council. Before you for public hearing this evening is a proposed street closing of a 231 square meter portion of Fieldstone Drive. At its meeting held March 20th, this council considered a report from staff advising that Simcoe Development Limited requested a reconfiguration of the street layout of its proposed subdivision. Originally, a cul-de-sac was contemplated to intersect with Fieldstone Drive. It has since been determined that that street layout is not feasible. Instead, the developer is now proposing to create a residential lot that would incorporate that portion of Fieldstone Drive shown on the plan of survey in the council packet, which is proposed to be closed this evening. At its March 20th meeting, council also resolved to set the public hearing date for the closing of that portion of the street to this evening. And in the event that the proposed street closing bylaw amendment that would give effect to that closure does receive third reading, the city also resolved to convey that portion of street to the developer. Staff confirms that the public notice was issued for tonight's public hearing and the requirements of the Community Planning Act have been met. Of staff is in the person of Curtis Langell is here this evening for if there are any questions for staff. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, so there's no presentation this evening.
Correct.
So I'm going to go directly to the public hearing, and I will open the public hearing, and I will ask if there's anyone here who would like to speak against the project. I'll ask again if there's anyone here who would like to speak against the application, I should say. And I'll ask for a third time if there's anyone here or online who would like to speak against the application. So hearing no one, I'll ask if there's anyone here who would like to speak in favor of the application. Please come forward and give us your name, even though we know you.
Your Worship, members of Common Council, Rick Turner, Hughes Surveys and Consultants, here on behalf of Simcoe. Ms. Tompkins' summation there pretty well covers it all, so I guess all I have to say is we would accept the recommendation. Certainly would appreciate that.
Okay, does anyone here, any of my team have any questions for Mr. Turner? All right, you're good, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of the application? And for the third and final time, anyone here who would like to speak in favor of the application? Okay, so I will now close the public hearing, and I will ask my team if anyone has any questions for Mr. Langell. Okay. I'll have the motions right away. Okay, if there are no questions for Mr. Langell, then we'll go to the city clerk for the motions required. City clerk?
Thank you, Your Worship. There's a motion required for first and second reading in this case.
Okay, so I'll take a motion for first reading by title. Councillor Hickey and the deputy on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
This is titled, "A Bylaw Respecting the Closing of Roads, Streets, or Highways in the City of St. John."
Okay, so I'll take a motion for second reading by title. Councillor Ogden and the deputy on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
A bylaw respecting the closing of roads, streets, or highways in the City of St. John.
Thank you. Okay, next item, city clerk.
So next, we'll go back to item 6, members' comments.
Members' comments. This is our speed round, 2 minutes for each councillor. Just lining up my stopwatch here. What? I don't see any lights going on. Councillor Radwan, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. So Asian Heritage Month is coming actually in May. So there's lots of events usually that take place with the Newcomer Center and the Asian Heritage Association. So we'll watch for those to come up. I got to enjoy breaking the fast for iftar with the Arab Association. And they're actually a new association that just formed in the city. And there was quite a group of people that showed up. I also, the next day, went to an iftar celebration with Councillor Hickey and Ogden with the mosque over on the west side, and that was well received too. I wanted to bring special attention to the fact that Chief Clifford went, and he didn't just go, but he actually fasted the whole day. So everybody was extremely impressed with that. The other thing that I wanted to make mention is hats off to Commissioner Hamilton and her team, because Sheikh Saeed mentioned he's opened 32 mosques across the country. And he said St. John was the fastest zoning process that he's ever seen. It only took 1 month. In Calgary, it actually took 4 years for him to get a property zoned. So hats off to city staff on that one. I did want to mention that it's sad to see at this great time of celebration for many people that there is a regime that is using laws and practices and discriminating against religions like Israel. And it is really wreaking havoc on the Christian Palestinians and the Muslim Palestinians while they're at prayer. And so I hope that these war crimes will be punished, and that next year that not just the Christians, Muslims, but also the Jewish community can actually have peaceful gatherings. And that's my hope for next year.
Thank you, Councillor. I liked your component about the one-stop development shop. We've been saying it, but now you've confirmed it, and it's wonderful to hear. Councillor Sullivan, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. 2 weeks ago, I was talking about the start of the Canadian Masters Curling Championship that took place at Thistle St. Andrews. And now I'm going to talk a bit about the wrap-up and just a couple of thank yous that we need to send out to the co-chairs, Wayne Cooper and Gail Saman, who led this effort. This championship was supposed to take place in 2020, and then the world shut down. And so they did all the work back then and then had to redo all the work again. I had the opportunity to represent the city at the closing. And gosh, if the response from the curlers says anything about the St. John hospitality, as one of the Quebec players danced by our table proclaiming they're moving here next week and plan on helping out at Thistle. And so I know that Wayne and Gail would share the thanks with the whole team, not just of St. Johners from Thistle St. Andrews. I saw more people who are former St. Johners who have moved away but come back to help out their home city and their home club. So we have a great history of being a sport tourism host. And the reason that we have so much success is because of the volunteers that we have in St. John that put it together. So in this case, to Wayne and Gail, thank you. But certainly an example for everybody else as all those championships keep coming. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hickey, over to you.
Thanks, Your Worship. To Councillor Radwan's point, it's not often you get 300 people in a room clapping for the planning department. Pretty cool. They were thrilled. It was very nice to get an opportunity to watch a bit of what happens over Ramadan and celebrate in an iftar. I tried my best to fast, but it was also Easter Sunday, so I did dip into a bit of turkey before I left, so I did feel kind of bad about that. I also want to recognize that today is Yom HaShoah, which is Holocaust Memorial Day, beginning on this evening into tomorrow evening. I was honored to join yourself and some members of council and a pretty large community group to raise the flag today, and also want to recognize the 90 plus families, Jewish families in our community, and certainly ones that are involved in our local synagogue as well. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I'll also reiterate that Yom HaShoah Day. We did raise the Israeli flag today, and really it was in remembrance of the 6 million Jewish victims that lost their lives during the Holocaust. So it's a day of remembrance, and that's what Yom means, apparently, day. And HaShoah is a remembrance. I was instructed today by Bruce Washburn, who knows all that. Anyway, so we do want to remember that. Thank you. Oh, Councillor Norton, you're last on our list.
Sorry, Your Worship, I just all that talk about the different, I guess the different cultures and religions and citizens that are representing our community. I had the privilege of meeting a family of 5 today that just has only been in St. John for a week from Belarus, so they're coming from all over, and making them feel welcome already, and they've already mentioned St. John's hospitality. So that wasn't my key message. My key message was pro kids. We know that a dollar doesn't stretch nearly as far as it used to. And whether you own a business or whether you're a regular citizen or whether you're a municipality, the asphalt doesn't spread as far as it once used to. So with that, Pro Kids has seen a record number of applications for kids to be involved in positive recreation opportunities. Over close to 1,200 applications were processed in 2022. Over 40 different activities were chosen. Over 20% of applications came from newcomer families. So if you're looking to see the impact report on that, you can get there through our city website or just Google Pro Kids. But if you're looking for a way to generously donate, Pro Kids, you can never go wrong. You'll always make a difference. And I'm telling you, it's not to provide anything other than a good quality recreation opportunity for youth in our community that otherwise would go without. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Councillor. I did have a little bit of information about our Jewish community here, a few facts, that the St. John Jewish community was formed with the arrival of 3 waves of immigration spread out over almost a century, creating a community of more than 250 families. In the 1960s, the community began to decline as the grandchildren of the immigrants moved to larger Canadian and American cities for educational and employment opportunities. Today, there are roughly 60 Israeli Jewish families and approximately 30 Canadian Jewish families in St. John. The synagogue in the city is used as a gathering place for the Jewish families. That's up on Leinster. And there's quite a few things happening up there tonight, but we're here, so anyways, thank you. Next item, City Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next on the agenda is under our consideration of bylaws. It's item 10.1, and this is for a proposed zoning bylaw amendment at 228 Lancaster Avenue.
Okay, I'm passing this over to Commissioner Hamilton.
Yes, Your Worship, members of council, before you for third reading is an application for a rezoning of a property located at 228 Lancaster Avenue within the Fairville Regional Retail Center on the city's west side. The application does involve a rezoning of the subject property from regional commercial to corridor commercial in order to permit a warehousing facility within an existing building on the site. The application did receive first and second reading on April 3rd, following the required public hearing. And with that, I can confirm that all requirements under the Community Planning Act have been satisfied, and council is now in a position to move forward with third reading. And with that, I'll turn it over to Your Worship and the clerk for the required motions.
City Clerk, over to you for motions.
This one requires just the 2 motions, approval of third reading in entirety and approval of third reading by title.
I've got Councillor Stewart and Councillor Lowe for approval by entirety on the question. All in favor? Did you have a question? No. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John. The zoning bylaw of the City of St. John enacted on the 15th day of December 2014 is amended by amending Schedule A, the zoning map of the City of St. John, by rezoning a parcel of land having an area of approximately 12,780 square meters located at 228 Lancaster Avenue, also identified as PID number 000-33357, from regional commercial to corridor commercial.
Okay, I'll need a motion to approve reading by title. Councillor Lowe and Councillor Hickey on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
Next item, City Clerk.
Next is item 10.2. This is a proposed zoning bylaw amendment with Section 59 conditions for 92 to 94 Bonnecourt Drive.
Commissioner Hamilton, over to you for the intro.
Yes, good evening, Your Worship. Members of Council, before you this evening for third reading is an application for rezoning with conditions for a property located at 92 to 94 Bonaccord Drive on the city's east side. The application involves a rezoning of the subject property from the 2-unit residential zone to low-rise residential in order to permit the creation of 2 additional dwelling units in an existing 2-unit dwelling. The application did receive first and second reading on April 3rd and following the required public hearing, and all applicable requirements under the Community Planning Act have been satisfied, and council is now in a position to move forward with third reading. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Your Worship and the clerk for the required motions.
Thank you. Okay, over to you, City Clerk, for the motions.
Thank you. In this case, there are 3 motions needed: approval of third reading in entirety, approval of the Section 59 conditions, and approval of reading by title.
Okay, so I need a motion to approve reading by entirety. Deputy and Councillor Stewart on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John. The zoning bylaw of the City of St. John, enacted on the 15th day of December 2014, is amended by 1, amending Schedule A, the zoning map of the City of St. John by rezoning a parcel of land having an area of approximately 1,037.5 square meters located at 92 to 94 Bonaccord Drive, also identified as PID 00446310, from 2-unit residential to low-rise residential pursuant to a resolution adopted by Common Council under Section 59 of the Community Planning Act.
Okay, I need a motion for approval of Section 59 conditions. Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Stewart on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
And a final motion approved by
And
title.
approved by reading by title. Councillor Radwan and Councillor Sullivan on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
The law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
Next item, City Clerk.
Next is item 10.3 on your agenda, and it's a staff report and bylaw flyer distribution, first and second reading.
Commissioner Hugenholtz, over to you for the introduction, please.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. Before you this evening is a bylaw respecting flyer distribution for the first and second reading. This bylaw was developed in conjunction with the General Counsel's office to address some of the nuisances arising from flyer distribution that have been brought to the city's attention over the years. This bylaw includes provisions that forbid distributors from delivering flyers to a property if a no flyers sign is posted. It also contains a provision against delivering flyers to a property if there are already a pile of old flyers in the driveway. This would be in addition to the cancellation that the distributor typically does offer, where you can opt out of that flyer delivery directly with them. Fines for this bylaw range from $300 to $2,100 per offense, with an administrative penalty of $150 that is available in lieu of prosecution in court. Subject to your questions, I'll turn it back over to Your Worship and the City Clerk for the required motions.
Okay, so I do have a question for you. Councillor Radwan, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Quick thank you to staff, and I just wanted to say congratulations. I think Councillor Hickey, this might have been your first motion when you got elected to council, and I can't believe how many calls I've had about flyers. And it's not just that people have been upset about the flyers, but the plastic that goes around the flyers. So people are worried about the environment. So anyway, thank you to this, and congratulations, Councillor, in getting this bylaw out there.
Councillor Hickey, over to you.
Thanks, Your Worship, and very excited to see this. I've been on council I'm into my 4th year now, and I think Councillor Radwan is right. This is one of my first motions. I just think it's a great step from a livability perspective. It's an easy one. I think at the time, before we modernized our waste management, I had done a rough calculation that we were spending about $45,000 a year in tipping fees on those things. It's just a nice little nuisance, and hopefully it'll clean up a couple streets and clean up a couple doorsteps. So thanks for that. I do have one question. Will the city be supplying the stickers, or Like, is it just like on residents to make up a little sign? Or
Yeah, there is a no flyers sign that is actually part of the bylaw on the last page.
Oh, okay.
Now that said, residents are able to make up their own sort of sign, as long as it's, like, it should be viewable from, where the distributors are throwing the papers out from.
Thank you, Mike.
Deputy?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, this has been a long time coming, there's no question about it. I just wonder if we could hit a couple of the main spots here, like, where can a flyer be placed at a residence? Can it be thrown in the driveway? Or does it have to be put in a mailbox? Just a couple of the highlights, if I could ask for that for the public's interest.
Back to Commissioner Hugenholtz.
Yeah, I can take a crack at that, and if our general counsel wants to add to that, she may, but this isn't necessarily that prescriptive in terms of where these flyers need to get placed. As you can imagine, with communities or with residences in our community, it really varies depending on where you live. In typical suburban areas, most of the times these are placed on a driveway. In some of the more urban areas, it's placed either at the doorfront or just kind of thrown towards the doorway. So I won't say that this bylaw will address each and every specific circumstance and all of the problems that can arise, but I think this does give us some good tools in our toolbox to address this. And again, I would stress to residents that have contacted us in the past with concerns is that their first action should be to address it with the delivery folks. So previously Brunswick News, now the Post Media, you are able to opt out of flyer deliveries entirely, and sometimes it may take a few phone calls, but that would be the first and probably one of the most effective ways to stop these issues from becoming a nuisance.
Thank you. General Counsel, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I understood the Deputy Mayor's question correctly as to, where those things can actually be distributed, I'd refer the public to Section 5, Sub 3, where we say, they won't be getting into trouble if they deliver those packages to mailboxes, mail slots, or any other receptacle designated for that purpose, if that was your question.
Deputy?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm getting at. Because right now, our biggest problem is they're thrown everywhere. So by targeting them to a mailbox, a slot, or a receptacle, like they do for some papers, I think that's a good idea. But I'd also like to say too that, I wrote an email to try to get a number to stop flyers from coming. It took 6 days to get a reply with the phone number. And, it was totally unacceptable. So, this is a great start, but I'm certainly not against having an opt-in option and doing away with them if this doesn't work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, City Clerk.
Your Worship, so in this case, we require just two motions, approval, first reading by title and approval of second reading by title.
Approve first reading by title. Councillor Hickey and the Deputy on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
A bylaw respecting flyer distribution in the City of St. John.
I need a motion to approve second reading by title. Councillor Harris and Councillor Killen on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
A bylaw respecting flyer distribution in the City of St. John.
Thank you. Next item, City Clerk.
Next item is 10.4 on your agenda, and it's a procedural bylaw amendment regarding motion by member, first and second reading.
General Counsel, I'm passing this over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before you for first and second reading this evening is an amendment to the procedural bylaw that gives effect to this council's resolution adopted at its meeting held February 21st, 2023, to approve the notice of motion process outlined in the staff report presented at that meeting, including the notice of motion template and the best practices for members of council to draft and submit a motion. In short, the revised process is a two-step process where the notice of motion is placed on the agenda of council initially only for it to be read into the record. The debate and voting on that motion takes place at a subsequent council meeting. This allows time for council members to consider the motion during a 2-week period before they are asked to vote on a motion. The amendment also incorporates a notice of motion template referenced in the February 21 resolution that helps guide councillors in the drafting of their motions and is intended to ensure that members of council receive the information necessary for them to make an informed decision on motions. I will hand it back to you, Your Worship, for the appropriate motion.
Okay, I think I have a question maybe for you, Councillor Radwan.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, I think to General Counsel, I just wanted to check. I thought that this motion was supposed to have an option, so if there was something time sensitive, that it would, and I don't know if I've missed something because I have read through it a couple times, but if there was something time sensitive, then it could be put on the table and we could end up deciding on the motion that day. Like it wouldn't end up waiting for the next meeting.
You're correct. I'll hand that over to the clerk for
Okay.
a response.
Yes, thank you for the question. So there are existing provisions within your bylaw that would be used that were suggested originally. So if there is a time-sensitive manner, what you would do is suspend the rules of the procedural bylaw
Okay.
with regard to this specific provision in the bylaw, and that would allow you to vote on the motion that came from a councillor at the very same meeting.
Well, that's good. I just wanted to make sure that there's nothing that would kind of eliminate that. So that's great. I mean, I think everybody knows that I think that this is creating red tape, so I've been voting against it, but I appreciate staff's time.
Thank you, Councillor. We suspend the rules of bylaws every time we go over 10 o'clock. You probably will remember doing that. It's one I don't like, but we do that occasionally. All right, it looks like there are no other questions for you, General Counsel, so I'm going to pass it over to the city clerk for the motions.
In this case, just the two motions, Your Worship, approval of first reading by title and approval of second reading by title.
So we need a motion to approve first reading by title, Deputy, and Councillor Hickey on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Radwan and Councillor Harris opposed. Motion carried. Next item. Yeah, you go ahead, read the title.
Okay, this is entitled "A Law to Amend a Bylaw Respecting the Procedures of the Common Council of the City of St. John."
Okay, I need a motion to approve second reading by title. Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Stewart on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Radwan, Councillor Harris, negative. Motion carried.
A law to amend a bylaw respecting the procedures of the Common Council of the City of St. John.
Next item, City Clerk.
Next item is 13.1, and it's a submission by the Finance Committee with respect to the 2023 General Fund and Utility Fund Capital Budget update.
Councillor Sullivan, I'm passing this over to you as the Chair of Finance.
Thanks, Your Worship. If I might real quickly, Finance Committee had a bit of a breather in January, February after budget season, and then got back to work at our last meeting. So, certainly thanks to the team, Councillors Hickey, Radwin, yourself, Your Worship, and Councillor Norton. But one of the biggest pieces of news that came out of the meeting isn't on the agenda tonight. The greater team in our corporate city of St. John, if you don't count the benefits adjustment at the end of the year, our budget monitoring policies and all of our departments minding their budgets, as you know from sitting on the committee, at the end of the year came in $8,610 within approximately $170 million budget that we have. So huge thank you to the work that our staff and finance department did to show how responsibly they manage the citizens' dollar. And also stolen bit of culture from our staff that listen to the conversations that go on around the table, and sometimes we put motions forward, sometimes we don't, and the staff reads the consensus of the will of council and starts to make change. We already started talking about the timeline for our budget deliberations coming up through the summer and into the fall, and many of the things that were talked about around this table in the last budget we're integrating into that system to always be wanting to improve. The reason we have something on our agenda tonight is concerns with regards to interest rates and what prices are coming back from our tenders and how we respond. And as with everything else we do in finance, we wanted to take a systemic approach, as I hit the wrong button on my computer, to make sure that should we get pressures beyond what we have budgeted as tenders come back, we approach it in a systemic manner. So the three recommendations in front of us have to do with capping the amount of money we will take from the general fund capital reserve if we have prices that are over our estimates. Recommend deferring certain projects according to a template so that we're doing it with forethought if we use up that reserve, and looking at the potential of deferring 3 utility fund capital projects if they are required to offset cost overruns. So none of these things are specific as of yet, but set the groundwork to make sure that we are handling any of the inflationary pressures responsibly. So I will move those 3 recommendations.
Thank you. So I have a mover on this 3 recommendations. I'll have a seconder. Take Councillor Hickey there. Are you on finance? No. Are you? Yes, you are. Here, we're on finance together, right? Sorry, Councillor Hickey. All right, so I have a mover and a seconder on the 3 recommendations that are in the kit. Any questions for staff? Councillor Hickey, over to you.
I'd just say really quick, Your Worship, 0.00004% of our budget. That's impressive.
It is.
That's how you budget. That's well, kudos to Chair Sullivan, to the whole team, to our staff led by Kevin Fudge. Well done. That's really impressive. And specific to this, I'd just say, I think what's important from the capital reserve, it was really built for situations like this. And what it's all about is about balancing that reserve and the demand from the community with our infrastructure deficit. How can we best balance that moving forward? And I think this is doing that very well.
I like to say that's performance. All right, so I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you to the finance team. Next item, City Clerk.
Next is under general correspondence, item 15.1. It's correspondence from St. John Community Arts Board regarding Spring-Summer 2023 St. John Community Arts Funding Program. The recommendation is to direct Commissioner of Finance to issue checks to grant recipients.
Okay, so there's a recommendation in the kit. I'll take the deputy to move it. Councillor Stewart, second. On the question, Kate Wilcott is available virtually if anyone has a question. On the question, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
Next is 15.2 on your agenda, and it's a letter, YMCA of Greater St. John, 3rd Annual Red Triangle Awards, and it's a ticket purchase request. Recommendation is to refer to the clerk's office to purchase tickets for interested council members.
Refer to the clerk's office, the deputy. Moving that. Councillor Radwan, on the question? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
Next is item 15.3. It's correspondence Operation Feed St. John, request to present to council, and the recommendation is refer to the clerk to schedule the presentation.
Operation Feed to present to council. Councillor Killen and Councillor Hickey on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
And item 15.4, it's a request from the St. John Ability Advisory Committee to present to council. Now, they did recommend a date where the council meeting has been rescheduled, so our office has communicated with them that we would substitute that date for the the new meeting date, and they're comfortable with that. So the recommendation is to refer to our office to schedule.
We refer to the clerk's office to schedule. It's for their annual update. Councillor Killen and the deputy on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
And now we have the items that came from Committee of the Whole. So the first one would be 17.1, and it's St. John Industrial Catalytic Project Update. And the resolution for Council's consideration is that Common Council allocate up to $155,000 from Strategic Real Estate Capital Reserve for strategic planning consultation services and other expert consultation services required to facilitate the work streams identified by Deloitte LLP in their final report and roadmap entitled St. John Industrial Parks Market Assessment.
Mover, Councillor Lowe. Seconder, Councillor Ogden on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
Next is item 17.2, and it's with respect to proposed sale of 450 Fallsview Drive. The resolution would be that the city enter into an agreement of purchase and sale in the form as presented to Committee of the Whole at its meeting held on April 17th, 2023, with Westside Holdings, Inc. for the sale of property at 450 Fallsview Drive, further identified as PID number 55217657, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the said agreement of purchase and sale and any other documents necessary to effect the transaction.
Take a mover, Councillor Sullivan, and a seconder, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Redwan, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. So I just wanted to say that although I'm extremely confident with who the city has been doing this agreement with, and I think that they're incredible entrepreneurs, I just have not been able to agree with the process on this file. As well, I just don't agree with the sale of prime waterfront real estate property for the citizens of the city.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ogden, over to you.
Yeah, I would just I think it's fabulous news that West St. John's getting another restaurant. And I know for years, a number of us have been cleaning Reversing Falls up, and everything's just coming along well at Reversing Falls. And last year, the city did all the stairs over, and there's even a little wharf there, but I think this is just fabulous news. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Radwan and Councillor Lowe opposed. Motion carried. Thank you. Next item.
And the final item from Committee of the Whole is item 17.3. And this was for stopping train whistles, including 2 West Side crossings. And the resolutions for Council's consideration is that Committee of the Whole recommends to Council the following: that the mayor be authorized to send a letter to New Brunswick Southern Railroad on behalf of the city requesting the cessation of train whistles at the rail crossings on Sherbrooke Street and Sand Cove Road, that the city enter into a contribution agreement with NBSR in the form as presented to Committee of the Whole at its April 17th, 2023 meeting, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the said agreement or any other documents ancillary thereto, that the city enter into a contribution agreement with the Provincial Regional Development Corporation in the form presented to Committee of the Whole at its April 17th, 2023 meeting, and the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the said agreement, that the city approve a grant in the amount of $145,350 to NBSR, and when required, as per obligations in the contribution agreement cited in recommendation 2, to be funded from the city's general fund operating budget, and that the chief financial officer be authorized to release the funds to NBSR provided by RDC upon and as described in the conditions being met in both A, contribution agreement with NBSR as cited number 2, and B, the contribution agreement with RDC as cited in recommendation number 3.
Thank you, Councillor, or thank you, City Clerk. There are 5 items here, and I will say part of them are process. The first one, that the mayor be authorized to send a letter to the New Brunswick Southern Railway, NBSR, on behalf of the city requesting the cessation of train whistles at the rail crossings on Sherbrooke Street and Sand Cove Road. That's the first step, so that's all in there. There's 5 recommendations in there. Councillor Norton?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to move the recommendation, but I know there will
Thank
be
you.
some.
Perfect. Councillor Lowe? All right, on the question, I don't see any questions. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Harris, just one opposed, motion carried. All right, next item,
That's the final item, Your Worship.
motion to adjourn, Councillor Lowe, over to you. Councillor Ogden, thank you very much, motion carried. Thanks, team. What's the time?